Counterintelligence and Security Center noted that as part of PRC efforts focused on state and local governments, the PRC collects personal information about current officials to target them for future exploitation. Mr. Kohler, how broad are those kinds of efforts? And can you cite any specific examples of how the PRC is collecting and exploiting personal information of either state or local officials?
Thank you, Senator. A couple examples I can give. So the PRC has embraced technology in a way that other intelligence services in other countries have not. So other hearings I'm sure you've heard about their massive intelligence collection capabilities, their cyber capabilities, and all the hacks that we've experienced over the last couple of years where most likely, if you're an adult in the United States, the Chinese government has collected your information. They can then use that information, overlay artificial intelligence on it, for example, and they can identify who your friends are, who your contacts are, who your business dealings are, and then they can exert pressure on those individuals to then try and influence you in a decision that you're making. It's not a perfect system that they've created. We see them making mistakes, sort of overemphasizing who they think may have influence on somebody, but their intent is clear. They are trying to influence the decision makers indirectly through people in their sphere, and they're identifying that sphere through the collection of information on all of us every day.
Anyone want to add anything to that? Dr. Tiffert?
Yeah. There are Chinese firms and proxies who are harvesting data from the data providers that collect all of our personal information data in the United States and offer it for sale for marketing purposes, advertising purposes. Chinese proxies are acquiring that information too because it is for sale in the United States and the safeguards are not in place. More than that, we have a really unequal, unlevel playing field in their engagements with the subnational level, simply because they have a vast apparatus whose job it is to collect information on every elected official at the state and local level that they plan to engage with. And we are completely outgunned when they meet with our local elected officials and our business leaders. They have fully briefed dossiers on all of them. And frankly, our side has very little.
Ms. Cook.
I would just add to that even on the open source side, they're looking at what different officials at the local level or who might be, what their positions might be. And there was one 2019 think tank study by a Chinese think tank that actually categorized U.S. governors as being either, quote, friendly or, quote, hardline or, quote, ambiguous. And you can take that for what it is in terms of the assessment, but clearly that, that's how they're approaching and navigating and processing some of this data and information.
I know Microsoft recently reported that PRC influence campaigns on social media are increasingly leveraging generative AI technologies to create content for those operations, which allows them to create deceptive content much more quickly, much more effectively, and to spread that content. For any of you, talk about what you're seeing on this front from your perspective. Dr. Tiffert.
So up until recently, PRC online influence campaigns were characterized by very, very high quantitative volume, but relatively little genuine engagement from real audiences. The generative AI is changing that. It's simply more appealing content visually, and it's generating higher numbers. And this is extremely alarming because in the last midterm elections, there was evidence that PRC online disinformation campaigns were beginning to create and misrepresent themselves as U.S. voters for the first time. And when you put those pieces together, I think it portends very poorly for the next election. That they're honing their techniques to create straw U.S. voters and generative AI content. It's something we need to watch very, very, very closely.
Ms. Cook.
I would second that, and I would add that sometimes what you're seeing is that there isn't necessarily a favoring of one side of the political spectrum or another. It's much more to sow discord, to sow distrust. And when you go through all of the different disinformation reports and the Google's YouTube takedowns, this isn't just one isolated incident. I think we see certain things getting headlines. This has been happening again and again over the last 2 or 3 years. This element of masquerading as U.S. voters across political spectrum is trying to get people to reshare content, particularly on divisive political and social issues in the United States. It's not just about Taiwan or Hong Kong or Xinjiang, though they do that too.
And I would just point out, having looked at the ads that were paid for from in rubles in the election just a few years ago, that is what I see, the targeted ads in my state again and again. That was obviously not China, but it was the same thing. It was sow discord, sow discord, sow discord, and a strong, the more divided we are, obviously, the more relatively powerful they become. So I think there's a good lesson for all of us in that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Collins.